Hello and welcome back to Deck Doctor. This week we have yellow events, but with a new Shaytan Monstrosity. Now, if you guys didn't know, there was a balance patch earlier this week that really changed the landscape of Faeria. We got some nerfs, we got some buffs. The Star Legends got adjusted so their land costs cost more. Kaleem, Aurora, Runin, and Cypher. So this was a small nerf to yellow events, but Monstrosity got buffed, and now it's a 0-5 with charge 2 for 2 deserts and 5 Faeria, and whenever a creature you own dies, it gains its attack stat. And this has made Monstrosity quite a playable card, and I've been using it in a yellow events list. Now, since this balance patch, Blue Jump is pretty much dead from what I can see. It doesn't quite have the early game pressure it once had. It may return in the future, who knows. But Yellow Events is probably the strongest deck currently in a very open metagame, I'll say. So Yellow Events, pretty standard. Colossus charges, mobility, removal, that sort of stuff. But we've also added the Monstrosity, making it more consistent on the creature side of things rather than getting clogged up with event cards. So this is a tempo deck. You seize control of the board, you use your removal and your cheap creatures to gain control of the wells, and then eventually finish them off with a Colossus and now the new Shaytan Monstrosity. So let's get into the cards and see what they do. To start things off, we have Outland Ranger, a great early harvester, but also provides a bit of utility and synergy with the campfire it provides from its gift. And you'll be using this to either protect your Outland Ranger in the early game, make sure it doesn't get removed by popular 2 damage removal, or you'll use it in combination with other creatures, especially the Windstorm Charger, to give it a power up and trade up the curve. Shaytan Demon is a great aggressive creature, but also really good in kind of the neutral game. You can use it at a double collection spot to challenge your opponent's threats, and it's just a great card all around. It does have the downfall of dealing 2 damage to yourself, so if you do summon this closer to your orb, you're going to need to get it up there somehow because you're going to take a lot of damage, and this can affect matchups, especially ones against burn. Last but not least, we have Windstorm Charger. Now, this card is insanely powerful. It's a 2-4, it has charge 2, so it can move around the board very easily, but when you use an event card, it gets +2 attack. So with a Campfire, it becomes a 5-5. Combine another event with that, like a Soul Drain, and you can pretty much kill everything in the game right now. So this makes Windstorm Charger incredibly powerful, and it will allow you to clear creatures that cost more Faeria. These are your later game creatures. Kaleem Sky Prodigy did get nerfed. It now costs 3 deserts, so it's going to come down a little later, which is a very good balance change for the card in my opinion. It was quite oppressive, but now being a bit slower, it gives your opponent some time to get some resources, but still a fantastic card. A 3/6 flying and charge generates followers to either collect Faeria or push damage, so just a very versatile, very powerful legendary. Now, Shaytan Monstrosity is the new addition to this. I'm making it a bit more consistent on the creature side of things. Now, this is a card you want to set up when you're about to trade with your opponent's creatures, or use it in anticipation of your opponent going to remove your creatures, and this will get powered up, and it can snowball to crazy stats. I had this guy go up to a 28 attack and one-shot my opponent in a match on stream the other day, so it does have a lot of potential. But what's great about it, it's a bit like Windstorm Charger in a way. You get these high attack stats from losing creatures rather than using events, and then most of the time it will trade up the curve, or it will trade 1-for-1, or it'll just push a lot of damage. So very versatile. I'm not sure if this will be in all yellow events decks, but I've enjoyed it so far, and it's a nice refreshing change. Now, Windstorm Colossus, on the other hand, is one of the reasons this deck is so powerful. A 5 Faeria 7/7 with dash 3 is incredibly powerful, and it's not difficult to get it down to that cost range. Even if you were to pay 6 or 7 Faeria for this, it's still a very good body. You know, it's a card that's going to be very hard to clear without hard removal. So overall, it provides a very good finisher, and it can allow yellow events to snowball out of control. Yellow has some of the most powerful removal in the game, and we are utilizing every piece of it. We have Soul Drain, which is a 2 Faeria event, which synergizes with the Charger and the Colossus. But this card's great because if you use it with Charger on anything with 6 life, you'll clear it. So if you've got a Ground Shaker there, you Soul Drain and hit it with Charger. You're trading 5 Faeria for 6 Faeria, so it's usually in your advantage. You lose card advantage because it costs you 2 cards, but you're usually not that bothered because yellow events tend to draw a lot of cards off the power wheel anyway. Choking Sands I've included because there's been a resurgence of Red Rush recently, combat variations and angry variations, and Choking Sands clears Underground Boss and Queen's Guard, which are 2 cards that become quite popular in Red Rush, and you gain an Faeria advantage, which is really good. Choking Sands usually doesn't gain that much value. You usually have to kill something down below it, like a free Faeria card, but fortunately, Underground Boss, Queen's Guard, and even Wood Elemental's another good target, where Choking Sands is become a very good card recently because of the shift in the metagame. The Last Nightmare, premium hard removal, you guys know what this card does. And there's only 2 of them. I've split between the Choking Sands and the Last Nightmare, so if you're finding that Choking Sands isn't giving you a lot of mileage, be sure to just drop it out and chuck in another Last Nightmare, because Last Nightmare kills anything, and it is not restricted like Choking Sands. But a great card to use, especially when you're ahead. It can be a bit bad when you're behind. If you spend all your Faeria removing a creature and you have no creatures on board to collect, your opponent's just going to summon another creature and you're going to be in the same problem. So you want to use this card when you have initiative. It's a far worse card when you're behind. Mobility is another powerful tool yellow has access to. Flash Wind is fantastic. It does what it says on the tin. It moves either one of your guys or one of your opponent's guys. If you move your own creature, it costs 0 and also has all the synergies with the Windstorm, Colossus, and Charger. And it's really good with the charge 2 creatures. Charger and the Monstrosity get to move around the board really easily, and the Origin Fanatic as well with its jump. And remember, moving your opponent's creature is also another way to find lethals. Just keep that in mind when you're trying to finish off your opponent on a turn. Maybe just moving one of their creatures out the way will be all you need to finish off the match. Now, Fanatic pretty much does the same thing, apart from you can't move your opponent's creature, but you do get a very mobile creature along with its ability. A 3/2 jump is very powerful. It's going to be able to collect Faeria very easily, but also combined with other mobility tricks, you're going to be able to move around the board and maybe find favorable trades, or maybe even push damage. So Origin Fanatic is a very flexible card. Last but not least, we have a few other cards which I haven't put into sections, but they're good in their own right. Now, we have 1 Soul Pact. This is going to give a burst of Faeria, have the event synergy. So it has a lot of good uses in yellow events. And this card would probably feature more copies if we weren't running the Monstrosity. So I've basically valued creature consistency over event consistency, because one of the weaknesses of yellow events is you do get these clunky event hands, and I feel Monstrosity helps with that problem. Now, Wind Soldier, again, another piece of removal. This card is featured in pretty much every yellow deck, and it is able to collect Faeria, so keep that in mind. If you do charge up past 2 wells, you will double collect, and this will cost 1 Faeria for 3 damage. So that is fantastic. And another thing about Wind Soldier is it synergizes with Monstrosity. So when Wind Soldier dies, Monstrosity gains 3 attack. So keep that in mind when planning out your Wind Soldier plays. For your mulligan, you're going to want to find an early creature to start collecting Faeria. Now, Outland Ranger is the best because you can collect on turn 2. You can double neutral from your orb and then just play the Outland Ranger, and that's going to start harvesting. However, Windstorm Charger is probably the most threatening creature you can play as a collector because of its charge 2. Depending on where your opponent's build, they have to really respect the fact that Charger can pretty much kill anything with the right combination of events. Now, Origin Fanatic is really good in combination with these 2 creatures. It gives out that extra bit of reach, allows you to play more aggressively and punish your opponent's creatures if they move too close to you. Now, I will just say that any creature you can play turn 2 is pretty good. I mean, you just want to get a collector. I mean, even a monstrosity as a 0/5 is not too bad. Shaytan Demon. But these are the ideal creatures you'd like to get. Now, alternatively, if you pick up a couple of creatures already, you can take some removal to go with them. Soul Drain's really good, combined with a Charger. It means that you can clear up to 6 life with just those 2 cards alone. You also have Wind Soldier, very good for taking out just 1 creature of 3 life. And if your opponent's run an Outland Ranger, it's a better way to deal with that card because most opponents will campfire preemptively against you, just so they can't get soul drained. Now, last but not least is Choking Sands. Choking Sands, like I said, is very good against Red Rush at the moment, especially the combat variations. So this is a card that can give you a bit of breathing room and allow you to set up your defenses. Yellow Events is one of the cheaper decks out there, and it is a very powerful one at that. So this is a great starter deck to get you going with Faeria. It can be quite complicated to grasp at the start, but if you have kind of a good understanding of the fundamentals of Faeria, like, the mobility and stuff like that, this could be the next deck you'll want to play. Now, it only costs 855 Memoria, has a lot of commons and rares, and I can even make it cheaper for you if you take out some cards. So let's take a look at some of the changes. So if you can't afford Kaleem, you can just add another Fanatic. It's not as powerful, but it'll give you some time to build up the Memoria you need to craft a Kaleem. If you do this, this reduces the price of the deck by 320. So that is a lot. So if you're looking for a budget deck, this is a very good option. Another change you could do is Choking Sands, which is an epic, one of the more pricey cards in a deck, and add in Last Nightmare. So if you're finding that you haven't got a lot of targets for Choking Sands during your game, this is a very good switch, and it's a good cost-effective switch if you can't afford the Choking Sands yet. Another good change as well, if you want to go down more of a traditional Yellow Events line, is dropping the Monstrosities and adding Kaleem's Training. Kaleem's Training is very strong in events. It allows your chargers and other creatures to fly, but you can also use it on Wind Soldier to deal 4 damage to a creature, and it doesn't need land then to travel across. It can fly, and you can get a lot of mileage out of that card. So Training, a very good option if you want to stick to the more traditional routes of Yellow Events. Now for the strengths and weaknesses. Yellow Events has explosive gameplay. The one thing about Yellow Events is most of the time once you get a charger set up and you get a couple of removal cards, you can have tremendous impact on the board. You can pretty much clear a board because of your mobility, because of your removal, because of the charger's reach. And you can have these explosive turns where it can be very hard for your opponent to make a comeback, especially if you can get a Colossus behind that. It has access to a lot of the game's mechanics. It has removal, has mobility, it has big creatures, it has small creatures, it has a bit of everything really. And that's what makes Yellow so powerful. It has a toolbox of mechanics it can exploit to win matches. Last but not least, we have powerful finishes with the Windstorm Colossus. A dashing 7/7 for 5 Faeria is incredibly strong, especially against colors that can't deal with 7/7s very easily. Yellow and blue can use Frogify, they can use Phantasm, Last Nightmares, plenty of ways for them to deal with a Colossus, whereas red and green, they kind of have to manage it a bit more honestly. Red does have access to damage-based removal, but it starts to add up when you chuck in like a Flame Burst and double Cypher's Wrath just to kill a 7/7, whereas green will have to use its creatures and power-ups to overwhelm it. Now, Yellow Events does have some weaknesses. It is reliant on event use to get max value, so you need to have a lot of events to get these Colossuses down to 5 Faeria, and I have cut back on some of the events just to make the deck more consistent overall. Shaytan Demons can kill you. That's right, if you leave a Shaytan Demon around too long, it could actually kill you, especially if you're playing against red, and red will capitalize on this. They will know that your Shaytan Demon will deal damage to you over time, and then they'll combine Flame Burst and stuff like that to finish you off. So keep that in mind when playing this card. Last but not least, it is prone to clunky draws because of event synergy. Now, I've tried to limit that as much as possible with the inclusion of Shaytan Monstrosity, but you can just draw a hand of events like a Flashwind, a Choking Sand, and the Last Nightmare. And what are you going to do with them? I mean, you're going to have to use them without a board, and you can fall behind. Now, one thing to keep in mind is I've drawn hands of events for like 3 or 4 turns, and I've still won a game after, just because of how much value my charges get and how cheap the Colossus becomes. So it's not an unwinnable situation, but it does make things a bit awkward. And so keep that in mind when you're building these yellow events deck. How many events do you really want to put in? How many creatures do you want to put in to make your collecting more consistent? And that is the build I've opted for in this Deck Doctor. Land placement is pretty straightforward with yellow events. You want to build towards a well, and you want kind of straight lines for your chargers and monstrosities to be able to move around very effectively, using either mobility tricks like Flash Wind, or just to get a good double collection off without having to build inside the wells. Now, the best opener, like I said, is Outland Ranger. You can go double neutral, and then you can build your first desert on a well. So when you do summon your chargers and your monstrosities, you can summon them on that spot, and they're able to double collect on the following turn. Now, if you're on the Explore, you can go for a desert in the middle, into Explore, into Desert, and this will allow you to again set up those chargers in good spots. It also gives you another spot for Kaleem. You can build Kaleem in the center, and then it can fly off to the right and then collect Faeria without you needing any land. Now, once you get these opening lands down, you want to push up the well aggressively and try and slot a desert in next to your opponent, and this will be a great place for you to apply pressures with your Shaytan Demon. Also the Windstorm Colossus. Don't be afraid to build to another side, especially if you have, say, 2 charges. It's a great way to double collect off your own well, and then start applying pressure to your opponent's wells, and you can still have a collector going uncontested. So don't be afraid to do that, but you're going to have to analyze, is it worth investing a land that turn and the creatures to move off to the right side or the left side. But that's it for land placement, pretty straightforward. Build towards your own well, contest your opponent's well, and eventually set up an aggressive land to apply pressure and win the game. That wraps up this episode of Deck Doctor. I hope you guys enjoyed it, and I hope you guys are enjoying the new balance patch. I kind of feel like the meta is all over the place right now. No one's really figured out where the tier list stands. We had very solid tier lists for the last meta game, but now they're all shaken up and anything goes right now. So if you have any deck ideas, this is a great time to try it. I feel that Yellow Events is still going to be a tier 1 deck, unless another deck comes along and just crushes it. So that's how meta games work. Perhaps someone has a deck that will knock Yellow Events down a tier, but right now it's still very, very good. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up, and if you haven't already, drop a subscribe to keep up to date on when our content goes live. If you missed the monthly cup, be sure to check out the VODs on this channel. You can watch all the action from the recent monthly cup and see all the players who competed for $3,300. If you'd like to build decks online, if you haven't got access to Faeria for some reason, you can go to the hub and build a deck there and share it with the community and your friends. You can also find the latest articles, guides, and decks from myself and the community. So until next time, guys, take care and have a great day.